Welcome to Module 4, Chapter 8, discussion on construction insurance. Now, before we go too far, most of the emphasis of this module, this week's lectures, is on Chapter 7, Contract Surety Bonds. I'm going to ask you very little from Chapter 8 on the final exam, actually nothing. I won't be asking you anything on the final exam. This is going to pop up a little bit, maybe in some assignments or discussion groups and discussion posts. But for the most part, I want to just hit the highlights of insurance. The chapter gets into some very in-depth conversations about a multitude of insurance. And so I want you to understand the purpose behind insurance. And if you're asked anything, it's really going to be about the purpose or about what causes you to have insurance in the construction project. So insurance is about risk management. You know, we talked last chapter about insuring the 16-year-old that's driving the V8 with the convertible. They're at risk. What kind of risk are we insuring? Well, you know, damage to other people, damage to property, you know, damage to other people's property, damage to their own car, damage to their own person. So you look at those type of things and you say, well, we need to allocate some risk management to protect this person from these situations. Same thing happens with construction projects. Risk management is the approach of how do you handle your exposure to loss from any sorts of danger, any sorts of financial or property loss that can come into effect, or even injury to people and loss of life. The book describes 4 steps under risk management that are appropriate. First one is recognize and identify the varied risks that apply to the construction process. We're in 8.2 on page 213 of your textbook. These may arise as a consequence of people involved or process, but you need to look at what types of things can go wrong in a construction process. The next one is to measure the degree of exposure presented by the risks identified. You know, here in Maryland, it's possible that you could have property, a construction site could be damaged by an earthquake. It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. It's extremely rare, but it's happened before. So you're likely to not get insurance to insure you for an earthquake. However, if you're in California, Alaska, Nevada, you probably might get if you're going to have a project that lasts you for a couple of years or a really big project, you're probably going to have earthquake insurance. So you have to decide what type of exposure you have and whether or not it's worth mitigating that exposure with insurance or offsetting it with insurance. How often is it going to happen, and the potential severity are the 2 factors that play into that. And then 3 is to decide how to protect against those risks that have been identified. If a risk cannot be eliminated by procedures or practices, then you may want to contractually transfer the risk to another party. Not necessarily always insurance. The book brings up some good points here, such as a hold harmless or indemnity provisions or waivers, subrogation. Those are contractual ways to maneuver your risk around to put it on someone else. Also, certainly to buy insurance. And when you buy insurance, you got to watch your deductible amounts and see which ones are actually, you know, the best approach to doing everything. So there's a couple of ways to shift your risk. One is contractually try to shift it to another person that might be responsible. And then the second one is to certainly buy insurance, and that's what this chapter is about. The 4th thing is to look at the company, look at your whole company and conduct company-wide programs for loss control and prevention. These are safety procedures, um, methods to secure sites. Equipment gets stolen all the time. So how do you secure it? How do you secure supplies? How do you protect employees that are from safety? How do you store stuff so that it's out of the environment, out of the weather? Those are the things you might look at to take a look at the company programs for particularly, usually safety is the big one that people have. And then also you have to pay attention and you got to monitor everything. It might be a situation where it becomes too risky and you might want to get insurance later, particularly like some theft insurance or something like that. So by the nature of things, people always want to shift their own risks. Um, if something's really dangerous, let's just say um, you need to climb up on the roof of your house. Well, that could be risky. Um, say your roof is 20 feet off the ground, second story. You need to climb up on the roof. It's risky. So what are you going to do to mitigate that and to help assign some of the risk and alleviate some of it? Well, you got to get a ladder. Okay, it's kind of hard to climb up the side of the house. Maybe there's ways you could do it. Maybe you have some brick or something, but you're going to get a ladder. That's the first step to mitigating the risk of climbing up on the roof. And then if you're like me, I'm a very big guy. I need a ladder that's rated for 300 pounds. So if I'm carrying anything up that ladder, uh, I want a sturdy, solid ladder that's going to hold me. If it's like a 200-pound ladder, it's not going to hold me. It's going to buckle. It's going to wobble, those type of things. So you start to get the right piece of equipment, the right insurance plan, the right procedure to mitigate your situation. So you have to sort of look at everything along the way and see what's cost effective and yet what shifts the burden of risk to someone else. In construction, there are a lot of risks. The book lists a few of them. I've named some. I mean, deaths is one. People get hurt, bodily injury, property gets damaged, things get stolen. There's accidents where property is damaged. Like a bulldozer or some piece of heavy equipment or crane hitting something that it shouldn't be hitting. There's also a lot of damage too with when something's not built correctly. I run into that a lot on the surveying side where sites aren't built correctly and there's damage done because of it. It could be water damage. It could be, just extra materials that need to come in to fix something. I've even seen buildings off, having to get concrete poured underneath of them, parts of buildings having to come down and get rebuilt. I've seen a lot of things happen on the construction side that are accidents and problems, but each one of these can be mitigated in some manner, whether it's a procedural thing or through insurance, but there's always these risks that are involved. There's and I said before in our last chapter, we talked briefly about the professionals, the architects involved, the engineers, they all have professional liability. Well, that extends a little bit further too now. So when I have, so I have employees, I have one employee. So when I have an employee with me, what I have in the survey side is I have a lot more insurance. I have errors and omissions. I get the professional liability insurance, but I also have workers' comp. Legally, in the book, we'll talk about it. By law, we have to have workers' comp insurance. I also have general business insurance. I have automobile insurance, which also is required by law. But I have general business insurance. You cover yourself in a multitude of ways. You figure out what's going to be cost effective. And even then, I'm asked to sometimes indemnify people for the things I may do wrong. So there's a lot of insurance that's involved, but engineers and surveyors and architects deal with professional insurance. We don't get involved in the things that the general contractors get involved in with regards to damage of property on a construction site. For us to damage something, it's very rare. It would be something usually caused by an automobile. Then you'd have auto insurance for that. Um, Managing risk and insurance for a construction contractor is really a difficult thing. Large scale projects create a lot of confusion. Could you imagine like hundreds of people working on a construction site? Any one of them could steal something. Any one of them could damage things. You got multiple disciplines. You got steel fabricators who might have some sort of, or not fabricators, but people that erect a steel. You got concrete people. You know, you can be building multiple floors at one time. You can have all sorts of disciplines, all sorts of people. It creates a situation that's kind of chaotic, and yet you need to have a manager on top of that and has the foresight to mitigate those risks, whether they're procedurally or through insurance. Insurance policies in 8.4, they're a contract. They're a contract where, just like the bonds, where the surety backs up the payments, or backs up the progress of things if the general contractor goes under. The insurance policy is a contract between the insurance company and the insurer. Sometimes it can name third parties as beneficiaries, but it's a contract. Not everything that could go wrong on a construction site is covered by insurance. It would just be cost prohibitive if you had insurance for every possible thing that could go wrong. Your premiums would be sky high and you may probably make no money. But these policies will have terms and conditions on which they will insure the insurer. So the person being insured, they'll meet these criteria, they'll pay their premiums, and they're covered for the things specifically mentioned in the contract with the insurance company. It doesn't mean, like I said, everything is covered, and your premiums need to be paid and maintain the payments. Some things can be a one-time payment for a construction project. Other things like, workers' comp, general business umbrella policies, auto insurance, maybe insurance for various types of equipment. All of that is going to be ongoing policies, payments, whether they're monthly or yearly or quarterly or yearly. Why do you have insurance? Well, one that we've talked about is to shift the risk involved to someone else, but it's also to protect people. You have insurance, like I said, against liability insurance on a construction site against damages that might injure somebody or even cause death. You get insurance for that so that you're protected as an owner, as a general contractor, and you're protected towards third parties. So contractually with the general contractor and the owner is going to require certain requirements for insurance. There's just no way around it. Some of those types of insurance, they're going to require the contractor to purchase coverages for obviously workers' compensation and automobile, but liability insurance, just if the contractor does something wrong, maybe even a general liability insurance policy, some sort of umbrella policy. They'll also define the limits, the amount of money that they want to be insured for. Generally, there's some industry standards for certain things, but dealing with the, $50 million or $500 million contract and construction project, something really large is going to have different levels of insurance, different amounts than a smaller job. Contractually, the owner is going to ask for property insurance from the general contractor to protect the property of the owner. If the general contractor does something wrong and damages the property of the owner, they certainly want that to be protected. There's some other stuff that could pop up when you have unusual risks. Maybe you're dealing with some things underground, or you're dealing with some, you're doing something offshore. There's other areas that could have special types of insurance that might be needed. The book talks a little bit about that, but the main thing is to realize that there are some things that are contractually going to be required. Then there's some legal requirements for insurance. The main ones are workers' comp and automobile. They're technically unemployment and Social Security are types of insurance also. You may have some other employee benefits that you may be required to have, whether they're the size of your company and dependent on the state. So, there's legally required things that you need to insure against. You may even have you may choose to have some other insurances similar, something like long-term disability for employees, some things like that, are insurances that you have to consider. When you look at insurance, and we're going to be wrapping up here shortly, you have to analyze what you want to insure. So aside from the things contractually you're required to have and legally required to have, you may want other insurance. So like for me, I have general business insurance. There's no requirement for me to have that. In fact, other than job specific requests, there's no requirement for me to have liability insurance in the state of Maryland, but I have it because I want it. I also have a general business insurance. I'm also protected against like loss of data, protected against theft of equipment or accidental breakage. So, literally I drop a $20,000 piece of equipment. I may be insured depending on how that happened, but if it gets, if everything's going correctly and it gets run over by a truck, or if somebody steals it, I'm insured. I have a separate insurance to cover that type of thing, equipment loss. So you have to realize, you have to analyze what it is you're going to pay for the insurance. Is it worth it? Or is there other ways I can mitigate the loss of something? So it's just every time you have to look at that, outweigh the cost versus the benefit. Like many other business decisions, insurance comes down to business decisions. And then if you've done the job enough, you basically will have a checklist of the different types of insurance that you have or can have, and should you get them for this site or this particular job or not. And the book covers those types of things. And probably, even though we're not going to talk much about them or ask much about them, I really do suggest that for your own benefit, you read chapter 8, 8, pages 218 and 219, and follows through to 220. The different types of insurance for different needs, whether it's for vehicles and employees, like we talked legally. There's also different types of liability insurance, property insurance, as well as property insurance during the construction site, and property insurance for the owner's property. So a couple different ways to look at insurance there. Insurance is big business, and it's something that you sleep better at night having enough insurance to cover the things that go on, in the workplace or on a construction site. If you're underly insured, it can break your company. If you don't have the proper insurance in place, you could go bankrupt. Think about the Hyatt Regency Hotel and that the structural engineer, it cost him everything he had. He never worked again as a structural engineer. His business was done. There was not enough insurance he had, not enough of it could even begin to cover the damage that it was caused. In fact, he went on a speaking tour pretty much the rest of his career. He's since passed away, but he went on the speaking tour with regards to uh, the the liability that's involved and making sure things are done correctly. So, that's what he ended up doing with it. So you have to realize that while insurance is important and a necessity, you can go overboard with it. But if you're underinsured, it's a terrible thing when you just don't have enough coverage. It really can put you out of business. So that's it for chapter 8 in insurance. The rest of the chapter was a paragraph or two specifically on each type of insurance. Feel free to read it if you prefer to or not, but won't be asking that much detail about insurance other than maybe something about the need for it and the types of basic insurance. So that's it. Enjoy the rest of the week and hope you do great on the midterm exam.